Okay, and if you click on these links, they are a definition. So if you're like, what the heck is point of view? You can click that and it'll give you some possible, it'll give you some definitions and maybe even some possible answers. Okay, I'm not going to read the definition of point of view, but if you want to do that, then you go ahead and do that. The only one that might be a little confusing that you're like, what the heck is nonlinear plot? Is this one here, because you're going to click that link and it's not going to take you to nonlinear plot, but instead it's going to take you just to plot by itself. Plot is the basic events in a story. Now, nonlinear plot, I think we talked about this just a little bit, but nonlinear plot is when the events of the story are told out of sequence. They're not in order. And the example that I always seem to use for some reason, I don't know why I do this, is the example of the movie Forrest Gump. And how Forrest Gump starts off with him as an adult, but then it goes back in time to tell you some information about when he was a kid. Then it goes back to when he was an adult, and then it goes back in time to tell you when he met his girlfriend. Back to an adult, and then back in time to show you when he was in the military. Okay, well, our passage does something very similar as well. Our passage uses nonlinear plot as well. And I'm going to let you all find that. I'm not going to do that one with you. Okay, now what's worth noting is that this whole top row should all be from the text. So this one says paragraph 2. This one should also have a paragraph number because it'll come straight from the text. This one here should also come from the text. This one here should also come from the text. And this question is here to guide you. Where do I see a good example of this in the text? So again, I have to go back to the passage to find evidence of the conflict or evidence of the point of view or evidence of that nonlinear plot that I was just talking about. Okay, now this next box down, why do I think that this is an example of that? Now this box here, don't freak yourselves out too much about this box. This box is really just why you think. There's not necessarily a wrong answer unless it doesn't quite answer anything or doesn't quite make sense. Okay, but this here is just your opinions and your thoughts on why you think that's an example. So again, as I was saying, this box here shouldn't be too crazy for you. This is just your opinion, and your opinion isn't necessarily wrong unless there's something obviously contradictory. Now, what's really important is the very bottom box down here. I wonder why the author used this, because this is where you get to flex your brain muscles a bit and kind of offer some insights and some explanations to why the author chose to set his passage at a school, or why the author chose to make this a conflict, whatever it is that you find, or why the author chose to make this person or narrator into a certain point of view, whether it's first person or third person, or why the author chose that non-linear plot that we were talking about a bit ago. Okay, this is really the part that I'm going to be checking for. This is really the part that when I read your pages, I'm going to check, like, hey, is what you're saying down here, does it sound like a valid, logical reason for why the author would make that choice? Down here is your chance to tell me, why would the author make that choice to include this non-linear plot? Okay, if you've ever seen like The Notebook, for example. But anyway, your job for the remainder of the period is to go and find evidence of that non-linear plot that I was talking about. Tell me why you think that's non-linear plot, and then explain why the author did that. You also have to find point of view. Now, point of view should be pretty simple. Don't freak yourselves out with point of view. But we know that there's a couple of types of point of view. I'm going to hold this up real quick. Hopefully, y'all can see it. It's not blurry. Right there. Yeah. Okay, there's first person, there's third person. That's really about it when it comes to point of view. And first person is pretty obvious because, like it says here, it'll use the word I. And the narrator is usually one of the main characters in our passage. And so if our passage uses the word I and me and my a lot, you'll find a good example of that and copy and paste it into this box. And then down here, you'll say, well, I think it's the first person because blah, 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 or because of the pronouns that are being used. Now, if our passage is third person, you'll notice lots of words like they and them and their. And if you find those pronouns in a sentence, copy and paste it into this box, and then tell me, well, I think it's third person because they use these certain pronouns. Okay, so that's not too hard. What might be a little hard or difficult is this bottom box where you explain, well, why would the author put us in that point of view? Why would the author want us to know either only what that character thinks and sees, or if it's third person, why would our narrator want us to know what all of these characters thinks and see? Okay, and then the last one here, conflict. There's a couple of different things you could say for conflict, depending on what point of view you're considering. whether it's Frankie T's or the narrators or both. Okay. And then you'll explain here how that evidence you found is an example of conflict. And down here, you'll say, well, why would the author make that a conflict in our passage?